I have an assistant who put videos on TikTok, and the video that got unnecessary backlash was the video where I was talking about monogamy. This popular, silent but popular debate in our generation that I want to address.
What does the Bible say about marrying a second wife? I'm a Christian, and the lady in question is also a Christian. I believe he currently has a wife, the way it's drafted.
Let me just say this, and we can address this with more detail, later, since this is a theological issue. I've heard a lot of people, so-called theologians, suggest that the Bible is silent on polygamy, and that's not true. You see, when you are a good student of the Bible, you know that everything relating to marriage, God refers to the beginning. So, a good example, the disciples had a question about divorce, or the Pharisees came to ask a question about divorce. Bear in mind that Moses already had a principle for divorcement, a procedure to follow. And this follows with the argument of maybe polygamy, because people use the law. The law is silent on it. And even some of the patriarchs of the faith, had multiple wives. So this is a parallel here. And Jesus did not answer based on what Moses said. He answered based on the beginning. He says, have you not read that in the beginning God made man and woman? He says, and he says, so what God joined together, let no one put asunder. Meaning, from God's initial order of things, you can get God's consistent mind about marriage and how it is to function. So as it pertains to polygamy, if God wanted man to have multiple wives, he could have just formed it wouldn't have cost him anything. So Adam would just open his eyes and 3 beautiful ladies, and then this will not be a debate. Listen, what I'm telling you is how Jesus himself answered questions on marriage. To understand God's plan and God's priority and God's wisdom when it comes to marriage, you go to the first marriage. And then another thing you must bear in mind, a lot of people try to dismiss this. When I say to people that in 1 Timothy 3, God is giving the requirements for a bishop, and it says, amongst other things, he must be husband of one wife. A lot of people say, well, I'm not I'm not a pastor. But when you look carefully at that list, you will see that many of the things that were mentioned, if not all of them, were things that are expected of Christians also. So the logic is this: someone who will be a leader in the church should excel at the tenets of basic Christian devotion. So that means what was expected of deacons and bishops are also expected of believers in Christ. So don't just say, oh, don't want to be a bishop, I don't want to be a deacon, so I can have multiple wives. If God said that about deacons and bishops, then he says that about all believers. So that's argument one. And then my first answer and most important answer is how Jesus answers questions on marriage. Because listen, the questions on marriage will be endless. I don't want to give more suggestions, things about how to, anyway, I don't want to give more questions to be asked, But one simple principle is go back to the beginning, just like Jesus did. Go back even before Moses, because there are things that were permitted because of the hardness of the heart of people. So Moses legalized divorce not because it was God's will, but men, their hearts were too hardened to tolerate God's ultimate plan. Are you getting what I'm saying? So by that same logic, you can't say in the Old Testament even David had multiple wives. Because of the hardness of your heart, some things were tolerated. But now in Christ, we have a different lens with which we see things. After all, the stony heart has been taken out of our flesh. And some people were saying, you're talking rubbish. You're not... And there are so many apologies for polygamy, defending it vehemently. So, first and foremost, let's address this. Assuming, just an assumption, assuming you wanted polygamy to be legal and everybody to be polygamous, how much is enough? How many wives? Let's say 4. If everybody had 4 wives, answer me objectively. Will that be the end of cheating? You see what I'm saying? We like to lie to ourselves. We like to lie to ourselves. Some even present polygamy as the answer to cheating. Answer is, so the question I need to put back to them is, if everybody had 4 wives, in fact, let's add one more. If everybody had 5 wives, will that solve the problem? Why are we lying? Solomon married 300 wives and it was not okay. He had 700 concubines. And you know, a lot of people foolishly use him as an excuse. Do you know that Solomon was wrong? It's clear. The prophet prophesied. He says, listen, I know a time is going to come, you will succumb to the pressure of other nations because they have kings and you're going to want to have a king. He says, whoever you choose as your king, 2 things he must not do. He must not hoard silver and gold. He must not accumulate wealth. Did Solomon do that or not? 2, he must not multiply himself wives. Solomon went and studied all the things he was not supposed to do and overdid it. And everything the prophet said will happen, will happen. Now, these women turned his heart away from God. Solomon was not the wisest king that ever, just so you know. His wisdom was specific. It was administrative wisdom. So he was good in administration, but he wasn't wise. His wisdom had a context. Are you getting what I'm saying? And like I said, I'm going to say it again. It's usually broke people. Some people are arguing polygamy. Then people that are earning 70K are also arguing. No. Have they used poverty to swear for you? Are you determined to be broke in this life? Because I'm just wondering, what is the plan? Please listen carefully. Oh my God. Some of the popular arguments for polygamy will be this. Some patriarchs of the faith had multiple wives. So they will give examples of David, of Solomon, and all those things. But when they asked Jesus about divorce, and someone says, oh, that's about divorce, not about polygamy. Listen carefully. When they asked Jesus a question about divorce, and the argument was the same, Moses permitted it. Just the same way someone says, the Lord doesn't abominate polygamy. It's the same argument. And that's why I'm using it. Jesus said, from the beginning it was not so. He says, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, permitted you to let go of your wives. He says, but from the beginning it was not so. It means that when you want to understand God's intent for marriage, you go to the beginning. You go to the beginning. And one sure way to have proven unequivocally that polygamy was God's will is if the first man opened his eye and saw 5 girls. And then Adam would now say, wow, these are now bones of my bones. And fleshes of my flesh. But that's not what happened. So God said, if you want to understand God's mind, go to the beginning. And it's the same with every other vice related to marriage and to sex.